As things evolve, we're hearing from Canadians who need more help, from businesses who need more support.
Tonight, the Prime Minister announces a program expansion for small businesses.
Our purpose, telling the stories of our people from the perspective of our people.
And APTN News celebrates its 20th anniversary. Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. COVID-19 has reached some of the most northern parts of Canada. Nunavik, the Inuit territory in Quebec, has seen more than a dozen cases. As Tom Fenario reports, they've called in additional reinforcements to try and slow the spread.
Located in the far reaches of the subarctic region of Quebec, Pervernatuk is an Inuit community of about 1,800 people. Per capita, it's also one of the hardest hit when it comes to COVID-19. There are currently 11 active cases here.
Everybody is isolated at home. Rangers are patrolling every day.
Maggie Asapak is from Pervernatuk. She's also a Canadian Ranger. The Rangers are a group of Army reservists that serve northern remote communities when called upon. In Nunavik, that usually means search and rescue missions. But now the Rangers are being used to help stop the spread of COVID-19.
They've been going around town, starting 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. To see people are isolated at home.
Minnie Gray is the executive director of the Nunavik Health Board. She says much of Nunavik's population of 13,000 lives in overcrowded housing. Currently, she says they have enough medical supplies, but the 14 communities are all remote. Gray adds that asking the Rangers to help stop the spread of infection was an obvious choice.
The reason for asking the Rangers to mobilize is that they know people in their community, and they're the ones that are able to communicate well and work with the community.
The Rangers, however, will not enforce the rules if someone refuses to obey. They will leave that to the police. And while they've been trained in how to use personal protective equipment, they are not being asked to deal directly with people diagnosed with COVID-19. Although that could change if medical professionals become overwhelmed.
That would mean that their current mandate would change, and if their task change, then it needs to be approved by the chain of command.
The current cases in Pervernatuk appear to all be related to one family, but in multiple households. One person is in hospital while the others are in isolation at home. There has also been good news. One person has recovered, as has another in the community of Saluit. So far, Asapak says everything in Pervernatuk appears to be under control.
We have a curfew at 9 p.m. and the people I haven't seen people after 9. The town has been very quiet.
For now, quiet is how Asapak and the Rangers hope it stays. Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Montreal.
Today, the federal government announced more deals with Canadian companies to produce desperately needed supplies. Well, Justin Trudeau committed more money for small businesses. Jamie Pashgumscum has more.
He said it before. The emergency funds are not perfect.
As things evolve, we're hearing from Canadians who need more help, from businesses who need more support. No one should feel as if they're alone in this fight. Our government is here to help you through these challenging times. So when we hear the program is not reaching as many people as it should, we make changes.
Today, Trudeau announced an expansion of the $40,000 interest-free loan for small businesses. Meanwhile, at the COVID committee press conference, Dr. Theresa Tam focused on the country's homeless population. Canada's top doctor said not having a home makes it difficult to follow protocols like social distancing and hand hygiene.
It is important that resources and supports for infection prevention control are in place to protect staff, clients and guests in shelters. Without immediate action, there will be more outbreaks and avoidable deaths with broader societal and public health implications.
Minister of Public Service and Procurement, Anita Anand, announced contracts with Canadian companies to offset unpredictable global supply chains. Like Canada's Geometric Energy Corporation, which will provide millions of gloves for healthcare workers, Bauer, which switched from making hockey equipment to face shields for frontline workers, and Irving Oil, which has partially retooled to produce hand sanitizer.
These companies and many others serve as great examples of the Canadian ingenuity and tenacity that will see us through this crisis.
In all, the government has ordered 20 million litres of hand sanitizer. The orders are expected to be shipped in the next few weeks. Jamie Pashagumskum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
3 more cases of COVID-19 have been reported at a mine in northern Ontario, bringing the total number of cases to 10 among workers at the facility. On Tuesday, Impala Canada issued an update to its staff on Facebook. Workers who left the Lac des Îles mine between March 29th and April 13th are self-isolating for 14 days. The site is located about 85 kilometers north of Thunder Bay. The Assembly of First Nations Quebec-Labrador says they're concerned about Quebec's decision to allow workers to return to mining sites around the province. In a statement, Chief Ghislaine Picard expressed concern about compromising efforts made by Indigenous communities to slow the spread of COVID-19. Flying workers in and out of these remote regions is a health concern, he says. Many of the province's mining sites also operate on unceded territory. Picard says a pandemic does not exempt governments from their duty to consult with First Nations. Testing kits arrived today for the Thunder Bay Regional Health Science Centre. There's currently 26 active COVID-19 cases in Thunder Bay, 6 of those in the hospital's COVID-19 unit, and exposure in the hospital last week led to dozens of staff being off work as they waited for test results. They've since been cleared to return to work. Dr. Stuart Kennedy says now that they have testing kits, they will get the results back faster.
Just 60 to 80 test kits that will allow us to do some priority testing that will have a 2 or 3 hour turnaround. We don't know how sustainable that supply is going to be, so we have to use that with caution. Healthcare workers are always a priority, but so are sick patients a priority, and we have to balance that.
Indigenous youth leaders gathered for a virtual town hall today to discuss ways young First Nations, Inuit and Métis can maintain mental health and wellness as the country's COVID-19 isolation period stretches into spring. Cedric Gray, the Quebec representative for the Assembly of First Nations Youth Council, says it's crucial that Indigenous youth communicate with each other throughout the pandemic.
Using youth to speak to youth, that is number one. There's also a mistrust of different government entities. We have the social historic reasons behind that, but making sure that this message of public safety doesn't come from a government entity telling us, do this. Because the government telling us to do stuff has been a cause of a lot of the problems that we've lived. So shifting that focus and bringing that message from do this to...
And we want to hear from you. Do you have questions about COVID-19 or a story to share on how your community is coping? Here's how to reach us. Send an email to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptn news. Or leave your comment on any of our social media pages. The Indigenous Bar Association is calling for an inquiry into the police shooting death of a 16-year-old girl from Winnipeg, saying they're outraged by authorities' use of excessive force when dealing with Indigenous people. Aisha Hudson was shot following an alleged liquor store robbery last week. She's believed to be the youngest person ever shot and killed by Winnipeg police. Advocates are calling for an inquest to examine Winnipeg police's, quote, problematic and oppressive behaviors, and say the officers involved should face repercussions. A wildfire in the Squamish Valley, which is about an hour from Vancouver, has forced the evacuation of an Indigenous community. The District of Squamish has also called a state of emergency because of the blaze. Tina House joins us now with the details.
Helicopter crews are aggressively attacking this fire here in the Squamish Valley. It was apparently started about 4:15 p.m. yesterday afternoon. As you can see along the ridgeline here, they're just dumping buckets of water on the hot spots at the moment. The smoke is getting very thick here in the valley. People are also on high alert and possibly evacuating their animals. We've seen people coming through with some of their cattle, their horses. Just down the road is the Chikai Reserve. They're very close to the fire, and we've heard from the Squamish Nation that they are also on high alert and possibly evacuated at this point. We'll keep you updated as more details come in. Back to you in studio.
Thanks, Tina. There has been another setback for the oil and gas industry in Alberta. The Keystone XL pipeline, which would connect Alberta's bitumen to a refinery in Nebraska, has had a permit withdrawn by a U.S. judge. The Montana judge ruled that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers have not adequately considered the effects of endangered species and revoked their water crossing permit. Until the requirements for the Endangered Species Act are met, construction cannot continue in areas that cross rivers and streams. The pipeline has had considerable protests. If completed, it would send over 800,000 barrels of oil per day from Alberta to the U.S. APTN News is celebrating its 20th birthday today. More on that still to come. Here's a look at Friday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. +5 with snow in Halifax and Charlottetown. -7 for Nain and Kuujjuaq. 6 above with flurries for Montreal. 0 and snow in Saguenay. +6 with flurries for Toronto and Peterborough. Rain in Ottawa. 0 with snow in Wawa. +5 in Thunder Bay. -5 with a rain-snow mix in Churchill. +4 in God's Lake. 10 above under sunny skies in Winnipeg. Showers and 10 for Brandon. +13 with rain in Regina. Showers and 8 in Saskatoon. +6 in Meadow Lake and Buffalo Narrows. Welcome back. 2 decades ago, a small group of Indigenous journalists, producers, and television crew were brought together to create a national news program for the First Peoples of Turtle Island. It was the first time something like this was done. Now, 20 years later, APTN National News continues to celebrate many firsts in the Canadian media landscape. Brittany Hobson brings us this look back.
April 16, 2000 marked a new day for Canadian broadcast journalism. APTN aired its first ever national news program called Envision.
Our purpose, telling the stories of our people from the perspective of our people. Since television news first began many years ago, the mainstream media has tended to focus mainly on negative stories when talking about our people. The truth hasn't been reflected until now. It's been just over a year since the official birth of Nunavut, but it was last Thursday at a special ceremony in Ottawa that the new territory's coat of arms was unveiled. APTN was there.
It was the first time a national newscast was dedicated to sharing the stories of Indigenous peoples across Canada, and it was put together by an Indigenous television crew. Bruce Spence is a current producer with APTN National News. He's been with the team since the beginning and recalls the weeks leading up to the launch.
There was a lot of excitement in the air. There was a lot of anxiety in the air as well, because it had never been done before.
The team had to start from scratch, beginning with constructing a television studio at the world headquarters in Winnipeg. After months of meticulous preparation, Envision was ready to debut.
We had a few guests come into the newsroom to watch the show go to air, and there was a lot of hooting and hollering and cheering and backslapping, for that. It was a triumphant moment to get that show on the air.
Around the same time, APTN also launched its weekly call-in show called Contact.
Welcome to Contact, the current affairs program of the Aboriginal Peoples Television Network. I'm your host, Rick Harp. On today's program, we're looking at freedom of the Aboriginal media.
The show aimed to dig deeper into timely topics such as traditions, the 60s scoop, and the environment, even taking its show on the road to Yellowknife.
It's going to be like an adrenaline rush unlike any other contact studio show that we've done.
From the beginning, APTN has strived to tell stories others won't. Whether that's reports of starlight tours or missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, truths important to Indigenous peoples. Francine Compton began her career at APTN News when she was 19 years old. Over the years, she has taken on many roles and is now the executive producer for the national news program. She remembers news hustling every day, but it would be a while before others paid attention.
We were on the block for, I want to say, at least a decade before starting to have our issues be noticed, before starting to see our issues lead the top story on other mainstream national news networks.
Then she started cutting his hair. And he said, I was so scared.
In 2009, APTN Investigates was born. It was the first Indigenous investigative news program in Canada. Slowly but surely, mainstream media took notice. But Compton says the pivotal moment came in 2012.
I believe Idle No More really was a catalyst in changing that, and having other journalists and outlets wake up and say, what's going on here? You know, why are the people making these movements? And look at APTN and what they're asking and how they're covering it.
2 years later, APTN News expanded its programming with the introduction of Nation to Nation, Face to Face, and Laughing Drum. Reporters continued to cover important topics such as Standing Rock or water and housing issues on Indigenous land. Current news director Cheryl McKenzie credits the APTN News team for this.
We really value people's perspectives, journalists' perspectives from across the country. That's really how we know what's happening across the country, is based on what the reporters and video journalists are telling us. So we give people a lot of editorial freedom that you would not get in other national networks.
For the past several years, reporters and stories have been recognized with various awards. However, the best reward has been staying true to what the team set out to do 2 decades ago.
My special moments at APTN are when we serve our people and they are proud of us and they feel that we've done a service for them.
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News.
What a great look back. And if you want to take a look at APTN's first newscast, you can go to our YouTube page to watch the entire show. That's at youtube.com/APTN News. Tomorrow night on APTN Investigates, centralization was a policy in the 1940s to relocate Mi'kmaq in Nova Scotia. Trina Roach asks what happened to early claim for compensation. Here's a preview of Relocation Experiment Part 2.
Niin delwis Gibert Stevens, Leo Yesasonic. No Chevy Pigeon Sibnicted. Wajadibnik Manigawisk. Hello, my name is Gibert Stevens, and I'm from Eskasoni First Nation, and my parents were from Maligwaj. Oh, I've always loved it here. I don't come back as often as I should, but I've always loved it here.
Maligwaj, an ancient Mi'kmaq community, abandoned in the 1940s when the federal government enacted a policy called centralization to relocate Mi'kmaq in Nova Scotia.
Psychologically, spiritually, we have not recovered from that yet.
You know, it's a dark history that can't be just put under the rug.
We were concentrating on what happened to centralization. Why weren't the native people compensated somehow? Maybe we should resurrect it.
Centralization, a little-known chapter in Canadian history, a social experiment, and one that failed.
And you can watch the rest of Trina Roach's documentary, A Relocation Experiment, tomorrow night following APTN National News. Well, still to come, a Mi'kmaq teacher is taking her classes online during the pandemic. Stick around.
Hello, I'm Todd Lamoran, and here's what we'll have for you on Nation to Nation. A prisoner advocate warns us of a potential wave of COVID-19 infections in prisons. In particular, she says the Saskatchewan Penitentiary is nowhere near ready. As well, we'll have our weekly briefing with Indigenous Services. One highlight is that lockdown measures made by many First Nations have so far yielded low infection rates. And the House's Committee on Health met virtually. There is progress on getting rapid COVID test kits, but it'll be several weeks before they're sent out. That's coming up right after the national news.
Here's a look at the rest of Friday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. +4 with showers in Peace River, Grand Prairie, and High Level. +16 with rain in Medicine Hat, 1 degree cooler in Lethbridge. Sunny and 16 for Campbell River, rain and 16 in Kamloops. +7 in Fort Nelson and Prince George, 6 above for Dease Lake. +6 in Old Crow, 10 above in Watson Lake. +9 with a chance of snow in Fort Liard and Trout Lake, 2 above in Yellowknife. -20 in Sax Harbor, +2 in Inuvik. -16 in Repulse Bay, 17 below and sunny for Baker Lake. -11 and snow in Clyde River, -14 in Cape Dorset. Welcome back. COVID-19 has closed classrooms and schools, but one Mi'kmaq teacher has taken her Mi'kmaq language lessons online. Star Paul is from a family of Mi'kmaq speakers and has been teaching the language for more than 20 years. Students in Eskasoni and at universities in Nova Scotia. Now she has taken the lessons online, free to anyone on the Eskasoni Mi'kmaq Language Initiative Facebook page. The mother of 7 hopes people will speak Mi'kmaq with their family.
The language starts at home, and so with me trying to give these classes to the people, they will maybe start to use these skills themselves to help their children to speak the language.
Another great online tool out there. That's your APTN National News for this Thursday. Stay up to date with the very latest on COVID-19 by visiting our special page, aptnnews.ca/COVID-19. Stick around. Todd Lamoran is up next with Nation to Nation. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night. Happy birthday, APTN News. We'll see you back here tomorrow.